Every time is a pleasure, and every time it gets better than the year before, so I'm very happy to be with you. I was at dinner the other night with a couple of my colleagues, and we were kind of talking about the presentation a little bit, and one of my associates turned to the other and said, yeah, looking forward to what Jim's going to say on Friday. You know, Jim, he makes you laugh, he makes you cry. And I turned to my colleague, I said, I don't think I'm going to make anybody laugh on Friday. I don't. We'll play it straight. We'll kind of tell it like it is, but hopefully we won't make people cry either. But what I try to do, people look at some of my presentations, they go, you're Mr. Doom and Gloom. I'm actually a very optimistic person. I wake up in the morning, I do what I have to do as the rest of you do. So I try to take a positive outlook on life, but I also try to be realistic. I don't like wishful thinking. I don't like denial. I don't like the kinds of analysis I hear where people are ignoring a lot of trends that are candidly very risky, and so I just kind of lay it out. By the way, I thought a lot of you were here for David Stockman's presentation. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. David and I come at the same issue from a couple different directions. David's a lot more, he's got a lot more data, he's got a little more US oriented. He had the global perspective as well. I tend to be a little bit more of a global macro analyst. But I said to Rick when I was preparing to come here this morning, this presentation is the first time I've ever done it. So kind of a world premiere, if you want to think of it that way. It's completely new for this conference. You know, when you speak a lot, you have a standard presentation. You tweak it, you update it, etc. But this one, I sat down and said, I'm going to write this one new. And I'll tell you what, before we jump in, I'll tell you what's different about it. For years, I've talked about risk in the system, the buildup of risk. I use complexity theory. I use a lot of science, Bayesian statistics, complexity theory, network science, graph theory, etc. to reach my conclusions, end up in the same places. Great analysts like David Stockman, who's, as I say, coming at it from a slightly different direction. And it's very easy to see an economic collapse coming. That's not hard at all, but the hard part is the timing. And quite often I get, one of the most frequently asked questions is, you know, Jim, I saw your presentation. I understand the risk, you got that right, but could you call me at 3 o'clock the day before it collapses, and I'll sell my stocks and, you know, buy some gold or whatever. And I have two answers to that. One is, I'm not going to know the day before. I can see it coming. I'm very confident in that. There are good analytical tools to reach that conclusion, but I'm not going to know the day before. It's just going to happen. And so my answer is, what are you waiting for? Do your preparations now, because when it happens, you won't have time. It'll happen very quickly, very dramatically, and you need to do some preparation now. The other answer is that, a scientific answer, is that you actually can't know. And then the other question I get asked is, okay, well, what's the catalyst? What things should I be looking for? And the answer there, I can give you a lot of examples, but it almost doesn't matter. And when I say that, I'm not being glib. I'm just saying that any one of a number of things could cause a catastrophic collapse in capital markets, much worse than 2008, much worse than what we saw in 2008, with a very different response function from the government. What's new is that, in my view, we're actually getting some visibility. We're getting closer to that point, much closer than I've ever felt we were before. And I actually think there are a couple things that we could identify and say, look at this, watch this. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a little more geopolitics, a little less economics. I think this audience is very savvy when it comes to the economics, and some of you have seen my presentation before. So the presentation is called Currency Wars, Trade Wars, and Shooting Wars, a Trebling Trifecta. This is a sequence, and we've seen this before in the 1920s and 1930s. So throughout the 1920s, beginning with the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation that most of you are familiar with, through the General Conference in 1922, UK going back to gold in 1925, the Great Depression, etc. You had a currency war, but then that turned into a trade war. Global trade constricted, commodity prices collapsed, people threw tariffs on each other, and then ultimately it turned into a shooting war, beginning in 1936 with Japan's invasion of China, 1939, Germany's invasion of Poland, 1941, Pearl Harbor brings the U.S. in. So that sequence of currency wars, trade wars, and shooting wars we've seen before, and my thesis, and I think I'll back it up, is that we're seeing that again. The first point I want to make is that